Have you ever thought you were finally starting over only to find strangers already living in the home that was supposed to save you? That's exactly what happened to Everett, a single dad who spent his last $15,000 on an old farmhouse, hoping to rebuild a life for his little girl. But when he returned weeks later, the chimney was smoking, and two young women were inside, claiming they lived there. What he did next would change all their lives forever. Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me from which country and at what time are you watching this story? The gravel crunched under the tires as Everett Kane turned down the narrow country road, the Oregon dusk settling around him in soft violet light. 5 hours of driving had numbed his back, but his heart beat faster now. This was supposed to be the second chance he'd been praying for. The farmhouse waited at the end of a winding driveway, half hidden behind a tangle of weeds and apple trees gone wild. He told himself it didn't matter what it looked like. It was his, paid for with the last $15,000 he had. Beside him in the passenger seat, his 5-year-old daughter pressed her small hands against the window. "Is that it, Daddy? Is that our house?" Her voice carried an excitement he hadn't heard in months, and for a brief moment, he smiled. "That's it, sweetheart," he started to say, then stopped. Smoke. A thin gray ribbon rising from the old brick chimney. He hit the brakes, gravel scattering. His chest tightened. The place had been empty when he bought it. No electricity, no furniture, no life. Yet now, smoke curled lazily into the darkening sky. Someone was inside. "Why did we stop?" Kira asked. Her voice trembled, sensing his tension. Everett forced calm into his tone. "Just stay in the truck for a minute, okay?" He gave her hand a quick squeeze, then stepped out into the cold evening air. The smell of wood smoke grew stronger, mingling with damp earth and the faint sweetness of fallen apples. Every instinct from his years in construction kicked in the cautious steps, the silent observation. The porch boards creaked under his boots as he approached. The front door was cracked open, a sliver of orange light spilling through. Everett pushed gently, and the hinges sighed. Inside, warmth hit him first, the unmistakable heat of a working fire. The main room, once layered in dust and cobwebs, had been swept clean. A fire blazed in the stone fireplace he'd assumed was broken. Two young women stood frozen by the hearth, their faces pale in the flickering light. They looked identical, same blonde hair tied back, same startled eyes, same dirt-smudged clothes. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then one stepped forward, her hands raised slightly as if surrendering. Please, don't call the police. We'll leave right now. We just needed somewhere to stay." Her voice cracked on the last word, and Everett's anger drained into confusion. These weren't vandals or thieves. They looked scared. The other girl moved to stand protectively in front of her sister. "We thought it was abandoned," she said quickly. "We haven't heard anything, I swear. We'll pack up and go." "Em?" Everett's eyes swept the room again, the swept floor, the patched windows sealed against the cold, the fireplace carefully cleaned. Whoever they were, they'd taken care of the place. Against his will, a flicker of respect mixed with suspicion. Before he could answer, a small voice came from behind him. "Daddy?" He turned. Kira stood in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her curls wild from the long drive. "It's cold out here. Can I come inside?" Everett's jaw tightened. "Sweetheart, I told you to stay in the truck." "I know," she said softly. "But I saw the fire. It looked warm." Her eyes darted to the two women. "Are these ladies going to live with us?" The question hung in the air like smoke. The taller of the two women found her voice first. "No," she said quickly. "We're leaving. We didn't mean to scare anyone." Her twin tugged nervously at her sleeve. "We thought the house was empty. We'll be out in 10 minutes. Kira didn't move. She just looked at them, eyes wide with innocent curiosity. "But you made a fire," she said softly. "Daddy said the fireplace was broken. How did you fix it?" The women exchanged a glance. The one who had spoken first, Everett, would later learn her name was Autumn, answered gently. "We just cleaned it out and checked the flue. It still works fine as long as you're careful." Everett stood silent, studying them. They were young, early 20s, maybe, and exhaustion clung to them like dust. Their hands were raw from work, their clothes patched and worn. Yet the room around them told a story of care. The swept corners, the stacked firewood, the curtain of old bedsheets hung for privacy. Kira walked closer, ignoring her father's warning look. She crouched beside the fire, holding out her hands to the warmth. "It's nice in here," she murmured. "Way better than the truck." "Sweetheart," Everett said softly, but she looked up at him, her small face open and honest. "Maybe they can show us how they made the fire work. Then we could all be warm." Her words struck deeper than she knew. Everett's throat tightened. For months, he'd lived by one rule: keep moving, keep surviving. Kindness had become a luxury he couldn't afford. But now, standing in this room filled with strangers, he felt something loosen inside him. The air smelled like wood smoke and hope. He met the twins' eyes. "Sit down," he said quietly. They hesitated. The one called Willow shook her head. "You don't have to do this. We'll go—" "Please," Everett interrupted, softer this time. "Just sit. Let's figure this out." They obeyed, perching on an old crate by the fire. Kira crawled into her father's lap, her head heavy on his shoulder. In the orange glow, the room looked almost peaceful, like a family photograph that had been waiting to happen. "My name's Everett," he said finally. "This is my daughter, Kira. We bought this place 6 weeks ago. I was planning to fix it up." "I'm Autumn," said the first twin. "This is my sister, Willow." "Twins," Kira murmured sleepily, her voice slurred with drowsiness. "Obviously," Autumn said with a faint smile. And for the first time that night, someone laughed. Everett leaned back against the wall, exhaustion washing through him. "Tell me," he said, "how'd you end up here?" Willow glanced at Autumn, and something wordless passed between them. Then she began to speak about their mother, the accident, the medical bills, the house lost to debt, the car that broke down miles from anywhere. Her words came haltingly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. Everett listened without interrupting. The crackle of the fire filled the spaces between their sentences. By the time she finished, Kira was asleep, her tiny hand curled against his chest. He looked at the twins again. Really looked. Two girls who'd done everything right and still lost everything. He saw the same fear in their eyes that had haunted his own reflection since the night his wife died, a fear of being unseen, unneeded, disposable. The silence stretched until even the fire seemed to hold its breath. Then Everett spoke, his voice low and certain. "This place needs a lot of work. Roof leaks, wiring's a mess, plumbing shot. I can't pay much, but if you help me fix it up, you can stay. We'll figure it out together." Both women stared at him, disbelief softening into tears. "Why would you do that?" Autumn whispered. Everett looked down at his daughter, her face peaceful in the firelight. "Because 6 months ago, I would have given anything for someone to give me a chance." Willow turned away, shoulders shaking. Autumn's hand found her sister's. "Thank you," she said quietly. Everett nodded, his eyes on the flames. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we start building again." Outside, the wind moved through the empty fields, brushing against the walls of the old farmhouse as if testing its strength. Inside, 3 strangers and a sleeping child sat by a crackling fire, unaware that they had just begun to rebuild something far greater than a home. Morning came slow and pale, the kind of gray light that made the Oregon hills look washed clean. A thin mist hung over the fields, and for a moment, Everett thought he was dreaming. Then he smelled wood smoke and heard quiet voices from the next room. He pushed himself up from the old couch, joints aching, and saw Kira still asleep under a quilt that wasn't theirs. The twins had found it somewhere folded neatly, smelling faintly of lavender and dust. He stood there for a long minute, watching his daughter's chest rise and fall. She looked peaceful for the first time in weeks. Maybe this house, with its cracked walls and crooked windows, was already doing its work. In the kitchen, Willow was stirring something in a dented pot, while Autumn stacked plates on a table that hadn't seen use in years. Both looked startled when they saw him. "We found some oatmeal," Willow said quickly, her cheeks pink. "There was a bag in the pantry. Hope you don't mind." Everett leaned against the doorway, unsure how to answer. He wasn't used to people filling his space anymore, not since everything had come apart. "As long as you're not planning to burn the place down," he said finally, trying for a smile. Autumn's lips twitched. "We'll try not to." He sat down while they served breakfast. The oatmeal was bland but warm, and Kira appeared halfway through the meal, rubbing her eyes. "It smells good," she said, climbing into the chair beside him. She looked at Willow. "Did you make this?" "Yes, ma'am," Willow said softly. "It's not much, but it'll stick to your ribs." Kira nodded seriously. "My mommy used to say that too." The table fell silent. Everett saw the twins glance at each other, unsure how to respond. He reached for Kira's hand, squeezing gently. "Eat up, sweetheart," he murmured. "We've got a big day ahead." After breakfast, he went outside to check the truck and clear his head. The air was cold enough to make his breath visible. From the porch, he could hear the faint hum of the twins, talking as they cleaned up inside. They moved like people who had been taking care of themselves for a long time, quietly, efficiently, always leaving things a little better than they found them. He crouched to examine the front steps. The wood was soft with rot. One wrong step, and it would give way. He made a mental note to replace the boards when he could afford supplies. Autumn stepped out carrying a broom, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "We didn't mean to make a mess last night," she said. "We'll stay out of your way." Everett straightened. "It's not about staying out of the way. If you're going to be here a while, we might as well make the place livable." Her eyes widened. "You meant what you said? About us staying?" He nodded. "You need a roof. I need help fixing this place. Seems like a fair trade." Autumn's expression softened, relief flickering across her face. "Thank you," she said. "You don't know what this means." He wanted to tell her he did know that he understood what it felt like to lose everything and still keep moving, but the words caught somewhere between his chest and his throat. Instead, he looked out toward the barn. "You two ever done any real repair work?" She smiled faintly. "I'm good at figuring things out. And Willow can make a list for anything." "That right?" he said, and for the first time in months, he felt something almost like amusement stir in him. By noon, the house echoed with sounds it hadn't heard in years, the scrape of brooms, the rhythmic hammering of nails, the creak of footsteps across the porch. Kira followed them everywhere, carrying her stuffed rabbit like a foreman's clipboard. "Daddy, that board's crooked," she announced more than once. "It's supposed to be like that," Everett said, hiding his grin. "For drainage." "Oh," she said solemnly, "but it still looks crooked." Willow laughed then, a sound light and surprised, as if she'd forgotten how. Autumn shot her sister a look that said, "Don't get too comfortable," but the corners of her own mouth lifted too. For a brief moment, the house seemed to breathe again. When evening came, they ate sandwiches on the porch steps. The air smelled of sawdust and rain, and the sky glowed pink behind the hills. Kira leaned against Everett's side, half asleep. Autumn hummed quietly under her breath, a tune he couldn't place but somehow recognized the kind of melody you'd hear through an open church door on a Sunday morning. Everett listened, eyes closed. It had been months since he'd heard music that wasn't coming from a radio in some motel. Months since peace had felt like something he could touch. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or how long this uneasy truce would last. But tonight, for the first time since he'd lost his wife, he didn't feel entirely alone. After Kira was tucked into the little room that used to be a pantry, Everett returned to the main space. The fire burned low, throwing soft light on the walls. The twins sat by the hearth, their hands wrapped around chipped mugs of tea they'd found in a cupboard. The day's work had left them dusty and tired, but there was a quiet pride in their posture. They'd made something broken feel like home again. Everett poured himself coffee from the dented thermos he'd brought along. "You two worked hard today," he said. "The porch looks almost new." Autumn smiled faintly. "It's nice to be useful again." Willow nodded, staring into the flames. "We haven't had a place to belong for a long time." Her voice was soft, almost embarrassed, as if the truth might sound like weakness. Everett hesitated, then sat down across from them. "You want to tell me more about that?" Autumn looked at her sister, then back at him. "Our mom worked at the processing plant over in Millbrook. There was an accident, machine failure. She got hurt bad. The company said it was her fault, and the insurance wouldn't pay." Willow picked up the thread, her voice steady but her eyes shiny in the firelight. "We came home from college to take care of her. Thought it'd be a few months, but it just kept getting worse. The bills piled up. We lost the house. After she passed, there wasn't anything left." Everett listened, the words hitting him in places he thought had already gone numb, losing everything he knew exactly what that felt like. He stirred the fire absently, watching the sparks rise and vanish. "I'm sorry," he said finally. It felt small compared to their story, but it was all he had. Autumn shook her head. "You don't have to be. We're still here." That counts for something. Willow gave a thin smile. Some days it feels like enough. Other days, I'm not so sure. Kira's sleepy voice floated from the other room. Daddy? Everett rose, went to her. She was half awake, hair tangled, clutching her rabbit. I heard voices, she mumbled. You talking to the fire ladies? He couldn't help the chuckle that escaped. Yeah, sweetheart. Go back to sleep. Everything's fine. When he returned, Willow was staring at the doorway where Kira had been. She's sweet, she said quietly. Reminds me of how we used to be before everything changed. Everett nodded. Kids have a way of believing the world's still good, no matter what happens. The three of them sat in silence, listening to the wind outside. It rustled through the trees, the same patient sound the house had probably heard for decades. Willow turned the empty mug in her hands. You said you lost everything too, she said. What happened? Everett's gaze drifted toward the window. The reflection of the fire danced across the glass like ghostlight. My wife, Melissa, he said finally. Brain aneurysm. No warning. 1 minute she was there, the next... His voice broke, and he cleared his throat. I sold my business, tried to keep things together for Kira, but grief's a funny thing. It eats through your plans. Autumn's expression softened. I'm sorry. He nodded, staring into the fire. You get used to surviving. You stop expecting anyone to understand. Oh? Willow's voice came gentle but sure. Maybe that's why we're here. So none of us have to survive alone anymore. The words hung in the warm air, simple and true. Everett leaned back against the wall, eyes heavy but mind restless. He watched the twins, their faces half lit by the fire. They could have been anyone's strangers on the edge of his life, but somehow they already felt woven into it. The fire snapped softly. Outside, a coyote called across the fields, lonely and distant. Everett's thoughts drifted, circling the same quiet realization he'd been avoiding since yesterday. Maybe this house hadn't been waiting for him at all. Maybe it had been waiting for all of them. By the end of the week, the farmhouse no longer felt abandoned. It still leaned a little to the east. The floorboards still groaned when someone walked across them, but laughter had begun to fill the cracks. Everett stood in the doorway that morning, coffee steaming in his hand, watching Kira chase Willow around the yard. The mist had lifted early, revealing a sky the color of faded denim. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked, and the smell of fresh earth mixed with the faint sweetness of apple blossoms. He couldn't remember the last time he'd heard his daughter laugh like that. Not the polite laugh she used with strangers, but the real one, the sound that used to bounce off kitchen walls when Melissa tickled her before bedtime. Looks like she's got energy to spare, Autumn said from behind him. She was holding a bundle of tools, sleeves rolled up, ready for work. Everett smiled faintly. She's been cooped up too long. Guess she needed room to breathe. We all did, Autumn replied, stepping past him toward the porch railing that sagged under its own weight. You sure this thing is safe? Not yet, he said. But that's what today's for. They spent the next few hours in an easy rhythm, Everett sawing, Autumn measuring, Willow calling out numbers from a weathered tape measure. Kira sat on the steps, humming tunelessly and giving occasional supervisor comments. Daddy, that board's too long. Miss Willow, you're stronger than you look. Willow laughed. You hear that? Our supervisor's tough. Everett grinned without looking up. She takes after her mom. The words slipped out before he could stop them. For a heartbeat, the air went still. Then Autumn spoke quietly, her voice steady. She'd be proud, you know. You've built more than a porch today. Everett kept hammering, his throat tight. Yeah, maybe. Around noon, they took a break. Willow handed him a jar of lemonade she'd mixed from an old powder packet. The liquid was cloudy and warm, but it tasted like summer. She sat beside him on the porch, pulling her knees up to her chest. You were a builder before? General contractor, he said. Used to have a small company back in Portland. We did houses, renovations, sometimes barns. Then Melissa got sick, and everything else stopped mattering. Willow nodded slowly. I get that. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind slide through the fields. Kira was playing with the rabbit in the dirt, talking to it like an old friend. Everett looked down at his calloused hands. You ever wonder if you can fix something that's been broken too long? Willow smiled sadly. Every day. But you start small. A hinge, a board, a heart. He glanced at her, surprised by the gentleness in her tone. The firelight from last night had shown him their resilience. Daylight showed him their grace. That afternoon, they tackled the barn door together. The hinges were rusted solid, but Autumn's determination was stronger than the metal. "We could use some WD-40, she muttered, bracing her foot against the post. Everett handed her the wrench. "Or brute force." She shot him a grin. "I've got plenty of that." It took all three of them and Kira cheering to break the hinge free. When the door finally swung open, sunlight flooded the dim space. Dust motes danced in the air like tiny stars. Inside were relics of another life. A rusted wheelbarrow, old feed sacks, a child's bicycle frame, yellowed newspapers from 1983. Willow traced a finger along the dusty windowsill. "It feels like time just stopped here." "Yeah," Everett said softly. "Like the house was waiting for someone to wake it up." Kira's voice echoed from outside. "Daddy, come see." He followed her around the side of the barn. She pointed at a patch of ground where tiny green shoots were breaking through the dirt. "They're growing," she said proudly. "Those are weeds, sweetheart," he said with a chuckle. "Maybe," she replied, squinting. "But they're trying really hard." He looked at her, at the stubborn joy in her face, and something inside him eased. Maybe weeds were just plants that hadn't found their place yet. By late afternoon, the light slanted gold across the fields. The day's work had left everyone streaked with dirt and sweat, but the air buzzed with the soft hum of accomplishment. The porch stood straight and sturdy now. The barn doors hung even, and the farmhouse looked, if only slightly less forgotten. Willow and Autumn had insisted on cooking dinner as thanks. Everett tried to protest, but they waved him off with the kind of authority only people used to surviving could muster. The kitchen filled with the smell of butter and onions, the sizzle of a skillet long unused. Kira sat on the counter swinging her legs, peeling carrots with careful concentration. "Daddy, Miss Willow said this soup can fix anything." Everett leaned against the doorway, smiling. "That so?" Willow nodded without looking up. "At least it fixes hungry people." Autumn added, "And tired ones." He crossed his arms, watching the small domestic scene unfold. The sound of laughter, the rhythmic chop of vegetables, the faint country radio crackling from the old shelf, all of it stirred memories of nights long gone. Melissa humming while she cooked, Kira toddling around with a wooden spoon, the air thick with the smell of home. For a second, he had to steady himself against the counter. Dinner was simple vegetable soup, toast, and coffee, but it tasted better than anything he'd had in months. They ate at the old dining table that had been dragged from a back room. The wood scarred and uneven, but somehow perfect. Halfway through the meal, Kira spoke with her mouth half full. "This is the best soup ever." Autumn laughed. "You must not have had much competition, kiddo." "She hasn't," Everett said with a grin. "I'm a terrible cook." Willow raised an eyebrow. "Good thing you can build. We'd starve otherwise." Their laughter came easy now, like a habit returning after a long absence. Outside, rain began to tap gently against the windows, a sound soft enough to calm the soul. Later, when Kira had fallen asleep on the couch wrapped in a blanket, the three adults lingered near the fire. Willow was darning a tear in her jacket, the needle glinting in the flickering light. Autumn dozed in the chair beside her, head tilted back. Everett poked at the fire with a stick, watching sparks lift toward the chimney. "Funny," he said quietly. "When I bought this place, I thought I was just trying to start over, fix something broken. But the more I work on it, the more I realize maybe I'm the one being fixed." Willow looked up, her eyes catching the firelight. "That's how it works," she said softly. "You build walls to keep the world out. Then you realize you built yourself in too." He nodded slowly, staring into the flames. The glow painted her face in warm shades of amber and gold. There was kindness in her gaze, but something else too, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Understanding. Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance, and the rain grew heavier. The farmhouse creaked, old but steady, like it had been through storms before and learned how to hold. Everett leaned back. His voice, a whisper, meant more for himself than anyone else. "Maybe rebuilding isn't just about walls." Willow smiled, threading the last stitch and tying it off. "No," she said. "It's about hearts, too. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the scent of rain and smoke, Everett realized the house wasn't the only thing learning to stand again. The rain had lingered through the night and into the next morning, turning the fields into a patchwork of puddles that shimmered under the gray sky. Inside the farmhouse, it was warm and dim, the kind of morning that invited stillness. Everett sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee from an old mug, the rhythmic drumming of rain on the roof, steady and hypnotic. Kira was drawing on the back of a grocery receipt, her tongue sticking out in concentration. "That's you," she said proudly, holding up a stick figure with big boots. "And that's Miss Willow. She's smiling because you fixed the house." Everett chuckled. "I'll take it. Where's Miss Autumn?" Kira added another stick figure, smaller but bright, with crayon flowers around her. "She's helping me make the garden." The simplicity of her imagination tugged at something deep inside him. For a child, the world was always repairable. By late afternoon, the rain had turned to a mist that drifted through the open windows. The smell of wet wood and coffee hung in the air. Willow and Autumn had gone into town to look for supplies, leaving Everett and Kira alone. He used the quiet to mend a loose window latch in the living room. The soft creak of hinges filled the silence, steady, familiar. When the twins returned, they carried grocery bags and dripping umbrellas. "Town's half flooded," Autumn said, shaking off her coat. But the diner still had pie. Willow smiled faintly and held up a paper box. "Apple crumble. Thought we could celebrate surviving another storm." That night, after Kira had gone to bed, the four of them gathered by the fireplace. The rain had stopped, leaving the world wrapped in silence. The firelight danced across the rough walls, tracing golden patterns that made the room look softer, almost sacred. Everett poured coffee into mismatched mugs, the steam curling upward like smoke signals from another life. Willow sat cross-legged near the fire, her hair damp, her hands cupped around the mug for warmth. "I'd forgotten how good it feels to sit by a fire," she said. "When Mom was alive, we used to do this every Sunday night. She said it made the house feel alive." Autumn smiled wistfully. "She always talked to the fire like it was listening, and—" Everett leaned back in the chair, eyes on the flames. "Melissa used to do the same thing, said it helped her think." For a while, no one spoke. The air was thick with the sound of wood popping and the steady rhythm of the old clock on the mantel. It was Willow who finally broke the silence. "Do you ever feel guilty for being alive when someone you love isn't?" Everett froze. The question hit him like a slow-moving wave, quiet, deep, unstoppable. "Every day," he said finally. "When Melissa died, I thought the best thing I could do for Kira was just survive. But surviving isn't the same as living." Willow nodded. "After Mom died, Autumn tried to make me believe we could start fresh, but I couldn't. I felt like moving on meant leaving her behind." Autumn reached for her sister's hand, squeezing it gently. "You didn't leave her behind," she said softly. "You carried her with you." The firelight flickered across Willow's face, glinting in her eyes. "Maybe, but it still feels like there's a part of me that stayed in that hospital room." Everett's throat tightened. He understood that kind of grief, the kind that didn't shout, just lingered quietly in the corners of every day. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You know, Melissa used to say something before she got sick. 'Don't close your heart, Ev. Promise me that.' I think she knew I'd try." Willow looked up at him. "And did you?" He smiled, weary but honest. "Yeah, for a long time I did." The words hung between them, suspended in the glow of the fire. It wasn't a confession made to seek comfort, it was simply truth laid bare, the kind that only made sense when spoken aloud. Autumn got up quietly, fetched a worn blanket, and draped it over her sister's shoulders. "We can't change what's gone," she said. "But maybe we can build something that would make them proud." Everett looked around the room at the patched walls, the uneven floor, the faces glowing softly in the firelight, and thought, maybe we already are. The night deepened, the kind that wrapped the farmhouse in quiet like a blanket. Outside, the rain had stopped completely, leaving only the soft hiss of the wind through the eaves. The fire burned lower, reduced to glowing embers that pulsed in rhythm with every breath inside the room. Autumn had gone to bed, her footsteps creaking faintly on the old staircase. Kira slept soundly on the couch, her small hand still clutching the corner of the blanket. Only Everett and Willow remained by the hearth, two figures framed by the warm, amber light. For a long while, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was tender, the kind that grows between people who have both known loss. Everett stared at the flames, their flickering patterns like thoughts he couldn't quite hold. He broke the silence first. You ever get scared that if you stop missing them, it means they're really gone? Willow nodded slowly. All the time. I used to visit the spot by the river where we scattered Mom's ashes. I'd talk to her, tell her everything that happened that week like she was just away for a while. I stopped doing it after a year. Thought maybe that meant I'd forgotten, but I think she'd rather see me living than sitting there crying. Everett's hand tightened around his mug. Melissa used to love the sound of rain, he said softly. She'd open the windows, even in the cold, just to hear it. After she died, I couldn't stand it anymore. Every time it rained, I'd drive somewhere else, just to escape the sound. Willow glanced toward the window, where the last drops clung to the glass like tiny beads of light. And now? He smiled faintly. Now, I guess it sounds a little like peace. She leaned back, letting the warmth from the fire touch her face. Keeping her memory alive doesn't mean you can't keep living, she said. It just means you carry her with you in a different way. Everett turned toward her. Her eyes reflected the glow of the fire, steady, compassionate, and impossibly kind. He didn't answer right away, but something unspoken moved across his expression, a small surrender, the quiet acceptance of truth. He rose and walked to the mantel. There, half buried under a pile of old tools, was a framed photo he'd brought but never unpacked. Melissa stood in a sunlit park, holding a 2-year-old Kira in her arms, both of them laughing at something out of frame. Dust clung to the glass. He brushed it away with his sleeve. Funny, he murmured, setting the picture on the mantel. I couldn't even look at this for months. Thought it'd hurt too much. Willow stepped beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe now it can remind you what love looks like, not just what it costs. Everett exhaled slowly. The flames flickered, their light catching the edge of the photo so that Melissa's face seemed to glow. He could almost hear her laughter again, light and distant, like the echo of a song carried by wind. For the first time since she died, he didn't look away. They stood there together, silent, until the last log cracked and settled. The farmhouse was still, but alive in a way it hadn't been before. A heartbeat made of firelight, memory, and quiet forgiveness. Willow turned to him, her tone soft but sure. You're doing better than you think, Everett. He gave a small nod, his eyes still on the photo. Maybe. One nail, one board, one day at a time. She smiled. That's how you build anything that lasts. Outside, the first stars appeared between drifting clouds. Inside, the last glow of the fire painted their faces in gold and shadow, the old walls holding their secrets gently, as if grateful to witness healing happen within them. By the time spring edged into full bloom, the fields around the farmhouse were alive again. Wildflowers burst through the fading frost, and the sound of hammers and laughter carried on the wind. The roof repairs were nearly done. The porch gleamed with a fresh coat of paint, and the air held that unmistakable scent of sawdust and coffee that meant progress. Everett wiped his brow with the back of his wrist, looking out across the property. The place didn't look abandoned anymore. It looked like a beginning. Willow was in the garden with Kira, their hands deep in the dark soil. You have to talk to the plants, Willow was saying. They like to be encouraged. Kira leaned close to a row of seedlings and whispered, Grow strong, little guys. Everett couldn't help smiling. He turned when he heard a car crunching up the gravel driveway. A silver truck pulled in, and a man in his 50s stepped out broad-shouldered, with the kind of easy authority that came from years on construction sites. Randy Miller, the man said, shaking Everett's hand. Got your message about the project in town. They're finally restoring that old library? Yeah, Everett said. We'll need steady help once the permit's clear. I can handle the carpentry, but I'll need electrical and roof support. Thought maybe we could collaborate. Randy looked around, impressed. You've done wonders with this place. Thought it was condemned. Everett glanced toward the garden, where Willow and Kira were laughing over a stubborn worm. Had some help. Later that afternoon, Randy joined them for coffee on the porch. He noticed Willow's apron and the open toolboxes scattered nearby. Your crew? He asked, with a raised brow. Family, Everett replied simply. Randy chuckled. Whatever works. The town's been curious, you know. 2 young women living with a single dad. People talk. Willow froze mid-sip. Everett's jaw tightened. Let them, he said. They don't know us. Randy shrugged, unconcerned. Didn't mean anything by it. Just saying folks around here like their stories neat and tidy. After he left, the silence on the porch thickened. Willow set her cup down gently. He's not wrong, she said quietly. People do talk. Everett exhaled, his voice low. You didn't do anything wrong, Willow. None of us did. I know, she said, eyes on the distant tree line. But sometimes it doesn't matter what's true, only what looks true. He wanted to tell her it didn't matter, that what they had built together was stronger than gossip, but the truth was, he understood too well how fragile new beginnings could be. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the hills, Autumn returned from town with groceries and a strange expression. She set the paper bags on the counter and said, Everett, someone called child services. The words dropped like stones. He felt the air leave the room. What? They said an anonymous report. Something about unsafe conditions. Too many adults living here. Questions about who's responsible for Kira. Willow paled. Oh my God! Everett's pulse hammered. It's fine. We've done nothing wrong. I'll handle it. But his voice trembled, betraying the memory of every loss he'd already endured. That night, after Kira was asleep, the adults gathered at the kitchen table. The light was low, the air thick with quiet dread. Autumn twisted her hands together. They'll probably just inspect, make sure Kira's okay. But if they start digging, Everett ran a hand over his face. They'll see 2 young women living with a man they're not related to. No official work papers, no lease. Willow swallowed hard. And they'll think the worst. He looked up at her, eyes steady despite the fear in his gut. Then we make sure they see the truth. Autumn frowned. How? Everett's answer was simple. By living it. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Somewhere in the darkness, a branch scraped the side of the house, a low, uneasy sound. Inside, the air hummed with resolve and unspoken fear. For the first time since that night 6 months ago when he'd found the twins in his home, Everett felt the weight of the world pressing in again, testing everything they'd built. But he also felt something else, the fire of a promise he didn't plan to break. The following morning broke bright and brittle, the kind of spring sunlight that hides no shadows. Everett stood at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching the mist rise off the fields. Every muscle in his body felt tight. The knock came right on time, firm, professional, without hesitation. Willow froze where she was drying dishes. Autumn instinctively straightened the counter. Kira peeked from behind the table, her rabbit clutched close. Everett opened the door. A woman stood there, mid-40s, in a tan coat and sensible shoes, her expression polite but cautious. Mr. Kane, I'm Dana Fletcher from Child Services. We received a call about your residence. Everett nodded, his jaw tight. Come in, Miss Fletcher. The farmhouse looked brighter than usual, like everyone had tried to clean the worry away. Dana took in the room, the patched walls, the freshly sanded floors, the scent of cinnamon from the pot on the stove. Her eyes moved to Kira. And this must be your daughter. Yes, ma'am, Everett said evenly. Kira, say hello. Kira stepped forward shyly. Hi, would you like some pancakes? Willow made them. The woman smiled, caught off guard. That's very kind of you. Willow appeared with a plate and a steady smile that masked her nerves. I'm Willow Hayes. This is my sister Autumn. We live here and help Mr. Kane with the restoration. We also, help with meals and childcare while he's working. Huh? Dana's pen hovered over her clipboard. Are you licensed caregivers? Willow shook her head. No, ma'am. Just family by choice. Something in that phrase hung in the air, soft but defiant. Dana walked through the rooms, inspecting carefully, taking notes. Every creak of the floor felt like judgment. She asked about sleeping arrangements, schooling, safety. Everett answered with quiet patience, though each question dug under his ribs like a nail. When she stepped outside to examine the property, he followed. The morning air was sharp and clean. You're doing a lot of work here, Dana said. Most people wouldn't take on a place like this. I didn't have much choice, Everett replied. It was all I could afford. She studied him for a moment. And the sisters? Why are they here? He met her gaze. Because they needed somewhere to be. And because my daughter needed people around who remind her the world's still good. Dana nodded slowly, making another note. You understand how it looks, though. A single man, 2 young women, a child. Everett's voice didn't waver. It looks like survival, Miss Fletcher. It looks like people helping each other when no one else would. Inside, Kira had been watching through the window. As Dana re-entered the kitchen, the little girl stepped forward, holding out one of her drawings, a bright crayon picture of the farmhouse, surrounded by flowers and stick figures holding hands. This is us, Kira said proudly. That's Daddy, and that's Willow, and that's Autumn, and that's me. We live here, and we fix broken things. Sometimes we fight, but we always say sorry. That's what families do. Dana looked at the drawing for a long moment. Her eyes softened just a little. That's very nice, Kira. Willow's breath caught as the woman closed her clipboard. Thank you for your time, Dana said finally. I'll file my report this afternoon. When the car disappeared down the road, the silence in the house cracked wide open. Willow turned toward Everett, her voice trembling. Do you think she believed us? He looked at the drawing still resting on the table, colors bright under the morning light. She didn't have to believe us, he said. She believed Kira. Autumn exhaled shakily. We can't control what people say, but that, she pointed toward the drawing, that's the truth that matters. Everett nodded. Family isn't about who the world approves of. It's about who shows up and stays. The tension finally began to ebb. Willow stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. You really mean that? He met her eyes. Every word. The quiet stretched, filled only by the faint ticking of the old clock and the wind through the curtains. Willow smiled then, tired but radiant, and something in the room shifted like the house itself exhaled. That evening, as the sun sank behind the fields, they hung Kira's drawing above the mantel. The colors glowed in the firelight, 4 figures standing together before the farmhouse that had once been empty. Everett stood looking at it for a long time. The weight of fear and judgment had lifted, replaced by something steadier. A promise kept, a home reclaimed. Outside, a gentle wind rustled through the grass, carrying away the last of the storm. Inside, warmth lingered, soft and sure. He reached for the lamp, turned it off, and whispered to the quiet room, We're going to be just fine. By late May, the world around the farmhouse was alive in a way Everett hadn't seen in years. The once barren yard now shimmered with color rows of tomatoes climbing their stakes, patches of lettuce and herbs thriving under the spring sun, and the faint buzz of bees drifting through the air. The soil that had once been hard and forgotten was now breathing again, rich with life. Everett leaned on the porch railing, his coffee steaming in the morning light. Kira was kneeling in the dirt beside Autumn, her little hands carefully patting soil around a row of strawberry plants. Willow worked a few feet away, her hair tied back with a red bandana, her face flushed from the warmth and effort. Looks like we've got a real farm going, Everett called out. Kira looked up and grinned. We're farmers now, Daddy. Willow says the strawberries will grow faster if we tell them nice things. Everett chuckled. Then we'll have a forest of strawberries in no time. Autumn wiped her brow and stood, her eyes glinting in the sunlight. It's more than a garden, she said. It's proof we made something grow again, starting with us. That evening, they gathered on the porch for dinner, fresh salad from the garden, roasted chicken, and Willow's homemade lemonade. The sun melted into the horizon, painting the fields gold. For once, everything felt still, easy. Willow watched Kira chatter through her meal, her curls catching the last light of day. She's different lately, Willow said softly. Lighter, happier. Everett nodded. She sleeps through the night now. For months after Melissa died, she'd wake up crying. I think she thought, if she fell asleep, she'd lose another person. Willow looked down at her glass, her voice gentle. She trusts again because you made it safe to. He smiled faintly. Maybe. But you and Autumn, you gave her something I couldn't. When she met his eyes, the air shifted subtle, fragile. What's that? Softness, he said. You reminded her that love doesn't disappear just because people do. Willow blinked, her throat tightening. The porch light flickered on, and for a heartbeat, the world shrank to the two of them. The creak of the wooden steps beneath their feet, the hum of crickets, the faint smell of earth and lemon. Before she could respond, Kira burst back onto the porch with a jar clutched in her hands. "Fireflies!" she shouted. "Look, Daddy! Willow, look!" Tiny lights blinked and danced inside the glass, glowing like fragments of magic. Willow bent to admire them. "They only shine when it's dark," she said softly. Kira nodded with a child's solemn wisdom. "So people can find them." Everett's smile faltered for just a moment. "So people can find them." He looked at the two of them, Willow's hand resting gently on Kira's shoulder, their faces lit by the flickering jar, and thought of all the nights he'd sat in darkness, not realizing how close the light had been. Later, after Kira had gone to bed and Autumn was upstairs reading, Willow lingered by the porch railing. The moon hung low and full, silvering the fields. She spoke without turning. "You ever think about what comes next? After this place is finished?" Everett hesitated. "I used to think the goal was to finish it, but now—" He glanced around the half-painted shutters, the garden, the laughter that still seemed to echo in the air. "Now I think maybe we were meant to stay unfinished. Keeps us learning." Willow smiled faintly. "I like that." She looked toward the field where the wind moved through the tall grass like an invisible tide. "Sometimes I wonder if Mom would be proud of us, of me." Everett's answer came quietly. "She would be. I can't imagine anyone seeing you now and thinking otherwise." Willow's eyes glistened in the moonlight. "You really believe that?" He nodded, his gaze steady. "Yeah, you brought life back to this place. To me, I think that counts for something." For a long moment, neither moved. The night hummed softly around them, full of crickets and unspoken words. Then Willow turned away, her voice barely a whisper. "Careful, Everett. You say things like that, and I might start believing you." He smiled, small, quiet, but real. Maybe that's the point. Inside the house, the light from Kira's room spilled faintly down the stairs, warm and golden, like a promise that the darkness outside couldn't quite swallow. And on the porch, under the vast Oregon sky, two people who had lost almost everything stood side by side, unknowingly planting something deeper than any garden could hold. Summer sunlight warmed the farmhouse and the small garden that now bloomed behind it. Rows of tomatoes climbed the fence, strawberries ripened under broad green leaves, and laughter often drifted across the yard. One afternoon, Willow returned from town with a folded flyer and hesitant excitement. "They're opening a shared kitchen downtown," she told Everett. "A chance to start my own catering business." He studied her face, saw both hope and fear. "You should do it," he said softly. "That's what new beginnings are for." "But I'd be away most days," she admitted. "I don't want it to feel like I'm leaving this behind." Everett shook his head. "You're not leaving. You're growing from it." That evening they walked through the garden as dusk fell, the air sweet with mint and soil. Willow plucked a sprig of rosemary and handed it to him. "For luck," she said. He smiled, tucking it carefully into his pocket. "For courage, too." When she drove away the next morning, the house felt quieter, but not empty. The rosemary's scent lingered in the air, proof that what they'd built together would keep growing, even in her absence. The first morning without Willow felt strange, too quiet, too neat, like the house was holding its breath. The kitchen still smelled faintly of her baking from the night before, a soft trace of rosemary and lemon that lingered in the air. Everett stood at the counter, staring at the empty chair across from him. Kira padded in, her curls wild, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Where's Willow?" "She had to go into town, sweetheart," Everett said gently. "She's starting her new kitchen today." "And?" Kira frowned. "But she didn't say goodbye." "She didn't want to wake you," he said. "She promised she'll be home this weekend." Kira's lower lip trembled for a second. Then she nodded bravely. "Okay, I'll make her a drawing so she knows we miss her." Everett smiled, though the ache behind it was real. "That's a great idea." The day stretched on in small silences. Without Willow's soft humming or her chatter about recipes, the farmhouse seemed emptier. Autumn tried to fill the space, turning on the radio, talking to Kira about gardening, but even she caught herself glancing toward the door more than once. By late afternoon, Everett was fixing the fence along the driveway when a car pulled up. It was Randy Miller, the contractor who'd helped him get the library job. "Kane!" Randy called, stepping out. "Heard you're short a hand now that your lady chef's gone to town." Everett forced a grin. "She's not gone. Just expanding her world a bit." Randy chuckled. "That's how it starts, my friend. First it's a few days in town, then it's a new address." The words landed heavier than intended. Everett just nodded, hammering the next nail harder than necessary. That night, after Kira was asleep, he sat on the porch alone, watching the stars blink into being. The sound of crickets filled the gaps that used to hold Willow's laughter. He pulled the small sprig of rosemary from his pocket, the one she'd given him, and rolled it between his fingers until its scent filled the air. He wasn't sure if the tightness in his chest was pride or fear. Maybe both. The next few days passed in a blur of work and distance. The library project demanded long hours, and when he came home, exhaustion hit before conversation could. Autumn managed the garden. Kira spent her afternoons chasing butterflies, and the farmhouse kept standing, but without the heartbeat of Willow's presence. Something vital had gone still. Friday evening, the sound of a car pulling up jolted them all. Kira ran to the window and squealed, "It's Willow! She's back!" Willow stepped out, her apron still dusted with flour, her hair wind-tossed, but her smile radiant. She carried a box filled with small containers. "Dinner delivery," she announced. "Wild Herb Kitchen's first official leftovers." Autumn whooped. "I told you she'd be a success." Everett helped her carry the box inside. The air filled again with warmth and the aroma of roasted vegetables and herbs. As they ate, Willow talked about her first week, the rush of orders, the compliments, the chaos. Her eyes glowed with a kind of energy Everett hadn't seen before. "You should have seen the look on the mayor's face when he asked, 'Who made the lemon tarts?'" she said, laughing. "I told him the same guy who rebuilt my stove." Kira giggled. "That's Daddy." For the first time in days, Everett felt his chest ease. But when the laughter faded and the dishes were done, Willow lingered by the sink, staring out at the night. "I love it there," she said quietly. "But when I'm gone too long, I miss the quiet here, the garden, you." Everett's pulse caught. But before he could answer, Autumn's voice floated from the stairs. "You mean us, right?" Willow smiled, embarrassed. "Of course." Autumn winked. "Just checking." When the house finally settled into sleep, Everett found Willow on the porch again, barefoot, her hair loose around her shoulders. The moonlight washed everything in silver. "I didn't mean to worry you," she said softly. "You didn't," he lied. She turned toward him, her eyes searching his. "Yes, I did. I can tell when you're pretending everything's fine. You get quiet." He sighed, his voice low. "I'm just figuring out what this all means." "You going after your dream. Me still trying to rebuild mine." Willow stepped closer, close enough that he could see the reflection of the fireflies dancing in her eyes. "Maybe they're the same dream now, just different corners of it." He smiled faintly. "That sounds like something Melissa would have said." Willow hesitated, then whispered, "Would she hate me for being here?" Everett looked away toward the stars, their light trembling above the fields. "No, I think she'd thank you for reminding me what it feels like to live again." The words hung between them, soft but electric. Then Willow reached out, brushed a bit of sawdust from his sleeve, and said, "Don't wait too long to live, Everett. Gardens only bloom when you water them." He nodded, his throat tight. "You just keep planting." The porch fell silent, filled only by the hum of summer and the faint scent of rosemary from the herb pot near the steps, alive, persistent, growing. Summer came fast. Willow's new kitchen in town grew busier each week, and her visits to the farmhouse became shorter. The laughter that once filled the house now came in echoes, replaced by the hum of work and quiet evenings. Everett tried not to notice the silence. He worked longer hours, fixed everything twice, told himself it was enough. But every night, when Kira fell asleep, he caught himself glancing at the empty porch, half expecting to hear Willow humming through the dark. One Friday, her car appeared again, headlights cutting through the dusk. She stepped out, tired but glowing, holding a basket of warm bread. "Dinner delivery," she said with a grin. Kira squealed and ran to her. "You're back." They ate together, laughter returning like a long-lost song. Yet later, when the house grew quiet, Willow lingered by the door. "It's strange," she said. "When I'm in town, I miss the quiet here. When I'm here, I miss the noise of the kitchen." Everett nodded. "Maybe both places are home now." She looked at him then, eyes gentle. "Does that bother you?" He hesitated. "Only when I forget this isn't about losing someone. It's about letting them grow." Willow smiled softly, stepping closer. "You're learning." He reached for the rosemary sprig she'd given him months ago, still drying on the sill, still trying. Outside, fireflies blinked over the garden, and the night settled warm and alive around them. For a moment, the distance between hearts didn't feel like distance at all, just the space love needed to keep growing. Autumn came early that year, brushing gold across the Oregon hills and tinting the garden with the soft colors of goodbye. The air carried a chill in the mornings now, and the scent of ripened fruit drifted from the orchard behind the farmhouse. Everett stood outside, hands deep in his jacket pockets, watching the wind move through the dying sunflowers. The house looked strong. Fresh paint, repaired roof, the fence standing firm. Yet inside, he felt that familiar tug of uncertainty. The library project in town was nearly complete, and Willow's catering business had grown faster than anyone expected. Every weekend she returned, bringing food, laughter, and new stories. But each Sunday night she left again, and the silence returned with her absence. That Friday, though, something felt different. Willow's old car rolled up the driveway earlier than usual, loaded with boxes. Kira spotted her first and shrieked with joy. "Willow's home!" Everett stepped off the porch. "You moving the whole kitchen out here?" Willow laughed, breathless. "Kind of. The new cafe partnership wants me to run the rural branch. I can work from home now. Well, from our home." The words stopped him cold. "You mean here? For good?" She nodded, her smile soft. "I missed too many dinners, too many sunsets. The work matters, but so does this." Autumn came out from the garden, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Told you she'd figure it out." That night, the four of them ate outside, under the amber light of the porch. Kira insisted on saying grace, her small voice clear and sure. "Thank you for our house, our garden, and the people who stayed." No one spoke for a while after that. The moment felt whole, like a circle closing. Later, after Kira had gone to bed and Autumn had disappeared upstairs with her book, Everett found Willow by the garden gate, gazing at the stars. Her hair was loose, glowing in the lantern light. "You really mean it," he said quietly. "You're staying." She turned, eyes warm. "Home isn't a place you find once. It's something you build every day." Everett stepped closer. "Together?" "Together," she said. The wind rustled through the dry leaves, carrying with it the faint scent of rosemary and wood smoke, the smells of the life they'd made from ashes. He reached for her hand. It fit easily into his, like it had been waiting there all along. Winter light fell soft on the hills as the farmhouse settled into its new rhythm. The work was done. The roof no longer leaked, and laughter once again belonged to its rooms. Willow had come home for good. Her catering business thrived, but she chose to base it here, in the place where everything had begun. "I missed too many dinners," she told Everett. "It's time to stay." A month later, they married quietly at the town hall. Autumn stood beside Willow, radiant in a simple blue dress. Kira scattered petals down the aisle with fierce concentration, making everyone smile. There was no orchestra. No grand speech, just promises whispered between two people who'd already lived through the hardest parts of forever. That spring, the four of them drove back to the old farmhouse that had once saved them all. The windows were boarded again. The weeds had returned, but it still stood solid against the wind. Willow placed a small wooden sign on the porch rail, "For anyone who needs a place to begin again." Kira read the words aloud, then looked up at her parents. "Do you think someone will find it?" Everett smiled. "I hope so. That's how good stories start." They stood together in the fading light, the man who had lost everything, the women who helped him rebuild, and the little girl who had taught them what family really meant. The wind moved softly through the trees, carrying the scent of earth and hope. Sometimes redemption isn't a miracle. It's a choice you make every morning to stay, to forgive, to love again. And in that small corner of Oregon, under a sky painted gold, they did exactly that. The farmhouse stood quiet under the Oregon twilight, its windows glowing softly like lanterns of memory. You could almost hear the laughter that once filled its halls, the sound of a hammer against old wood, the small footsteps of a child running toward the garden. Everything they built there, every repaired beam, every seed in the soil, was more than a home. It was proof that love, when shared, can bring the broken back to life. Everett had bought that house thinking he was rebuilding walls, but what he really rebuilt was faith. Willow and Autumn came to that place with nothing but loss, yet found the kind of family that doesn't ask for permission to exist. It simply grows, quietly and without pride, like the rosemary by the porch steps. And Kira, with her gentle laughter and unguarded heart, reminded them all that innocence and kindness can heal wounds even years of sorrow could not. Sometimes, the greatest redemption doesn't come with grand apologies or miracles. It comes in the small moments: a shared meal at dusk, the sound of rain on the roof, the courage to forgive yourself one more time. It's in letting people in, even when the world tells you to lock the door. Because love, like a good garden, only flourishes when you tend to it every day with patience, with care, and with the quiet hope that spring will always return. Life lesson: love and redemption are not gifts reserved for the lucky. They are choices we make when we open our hearts again. Everyone deserves a home, not just a roof over their heads, but a place where they are seen, forgiven, and loved. Money can buy a house, but only kindness builds a family. And maybe, just maybe, it's like that porch light we leave on for someone coming home late at night. One small light, steady and warm, is enough to guide even the loneliest traveler back to where they belong. So tonight, as you finish this story, think about the people who once helped you rebuild your own farmhouse. Not the kind made of wood and nails, but the one made of second chances. Maybe it was a friend who called when you were hurting, or a grandchild who reminded you to smile again. Those are the stories that matter. If this tale touched your heart, press 1" the comments. If you think it could be told better, or you have a story of your own to share, press 0 and tell me what you felt. And if you carry even a little of its warmth into your next conversation, into your next act of kindness, then the story lives on. Because happiness, like a good meal shared at a family table, grows best when it's passed around.